the message today, to the other side, coming from Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. Now, there's a lot in this passage. Normally I'm too quiet, but now I'm a little too loud. Somebody last week, I was using this for something, and somebody said, "Whatever you do, don't bend it," because I think it's molded to Clyde's head. And so I thought, well, he told me to preach today, so I bent it today. So maybe that's why I'm extra loud. I think my face is longer than his, and so I had to straighten it out a little bit. So he'll be in for a treat next week when he's back. Anyway, but this passage, chapter 4, verses 35 to 41, really it seems very straightforward. It seems pretty cut and dried, pretty simple. But the more I studied and prayed over this, there's a lot more in there than I had ever realized before. So let's just jump in and start. Mark 4, many of you are probably familiar with this, verses 35 to 38. Yeah, can't really see the last couple lines. We got rainforest in the way. But Jesus stills the storm. On that day when evening had come, Jesus had said to his disciples, "Let's go across to the other side of the Sea of Galilee." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat just as he was. Other boats were with him also. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And the disciples awoke him, and they said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" I'm going to pause right there. I'm going to say whenever I read a Bible story and when I really want to kind of get a feel for it, I've said this before, I try to put myself in the story. I close my eyes and imagine myself in the story, which is hard to close your eyes and read at the same time, but so I maybe just close one eye. So I try to imagine myself in that story. And so I'm going to try to maybe paint a little mental picture for you to maybe explain what's going on, and hopefully as I explain and describe in vivid detail, a vivid image may pop into your mind that helps you see what was maybe happening. And so the thing to realize is, remember, many of these disciples were fishermen. And they're men of the sea. You know, like, Deadliest Catch has got nothing on these guys. These guys were tough guys. They'd sailed the Sea of Galilee before. Now, what I didn't realize was the Sea of Galilee is really kind of a treacherous sea. The geography of the land, it's in a deep depression. On the east side are very tall mountains. On the west side, there are hills with deep channels. I'm missing the word here. If I look back here, I have it written down. Gorges. That's the word. So mountains on the east, on the west-hand side, on the west side, hills with gorges. And what happens is the wind sweeps through those gorges across the lake, hit the mountains, and then they begin to swirl over the lake. And so the Sea of Galilee is very well known for having sudden, intense squalls spring up out of nowhere. Intense storms. Just in an instant. Now, these men had fished the Sea of Galilee before. They knew what they were doing. Now, not all the disciples were fishermen, but there were enough of them that if I'm in a boat with some of those disciples that were fishermen, they're tough, men of the sea. I think I'm going to be able to relax. Well, they know what they're doing. We're probably pretty good. They've probably been through these storms before. They knew what storms were like. They knew how to handle themselves in a storm. The tricky thing is this storm was a little bit different. Even though they know that sudden squalls pop up and they're pretty intense, this one was a little bit more intense than normal. You can kind of see that's Rembrandt's rendition of what's going on in the boat, and you can see probably the fishermen are the ones that are standing up, battening down the hatches and doing whatever it is that men of the sea do in a storm. And then there's others that are just kind of sitting in the back of the boat. Some of them look like they're on their knees praying. One of them is leaning over the edge, probably not checking the depth of the sea, maybe making it just slightest bit deeper. I'm not sure. That would probably be me. Put myself in the story. I'm leaning over the edge of the boat because I'm not very seaworthy. But then you can see Jesus in the lower right-hand side. His face is glowing. He seems pretty calm. He's not frantically running around battening down the hatches or whatever it is that they do. And the disciples go to him and they say, "Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing?" Some translations say, "Do you not care we're drowning?" Now, the word that Mark uses to describe this word perishing, it means to be utterly destroyed. That's the direct translation, to destroy utterly. And that word, the only time it's used when somebody knows that death is coming. There's no way around it. We're dead. It's just, we're dead. We're utterly destroyed. So they go to Jesus, sleeping in the boat, as they're frantically doing everything they can, but they know that they are going to die, and they come to Jesus, and I doubt they just tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Jesus, we're dying." No, I'm sure there's a little bit more than that. Okay, maybe like a shaking, and "Teacher, don't you care? We're drowning. We're utterly being destroyed. We are dying here, and you're sleeping in the back of the boat. We're dying." So, Clyde's been telling us lately, to understand what's going on in the story, it's always important to read a little bit before. So if we go back to the beginning of Mark 4, what's happening leading right up to this is Jesus is teaching a crowd along the seashore. And the crowd gets so big on the shore that they're kind of pushing Jesus closer and closer to the water. So the disciples finally just say, "Well, let's just put you in a boat and we'll kind of shove off a little bit and just you teach in the boat, you teach to the crowds on the shore." And there were thousands of people on the shore, and Jesus started teaching. And the way Jesus taught, he taught in parables. He told stories. He didn't preach right at people. He told them stories. And so this is when we hear the story or the parable of the sower. There's the good soil, there's the rocky soil, there's all sorts of different soil. Most of us have maybe heard that before. There's also a little something about, if I have a light, do I hide it under a bushel? No, I'm going to let it shine. There's a parable about that. Jesus uses that one. Talks about the mustard seed. As he's teaching the people in parables on the shore, he's then talking to the disciples, and they're saying, "Why do you tell these stories?" And so Jesus is telling them, "Well, this is why I use stories. This is why I don't just, beat them over the head with the Bible. I tell them stories." So if you've ever wondered why Jesus tells stories rather than preaching directly at people, go to Mark 4. You'll be able to hear how he explained it to the disciples. If we go back even a little bit farther, the disciples had been walking with Jesus for a while. They'd seen him do all sorts of different miracles, heal all sorts of different people. Now, this story of Jesus calming the storm, it's in Mark, it's in Luke, it's in Matthew. It's actually Luke 8, Luke's version of this story. But if you go back one chapter, Mark doesn't talk about this specifically, but Luke does. Just before this, just a little before this, Jesus, in the presence of his disciples, raises a little boy from the dead, the widow's son. Widow's son is dead. Jesus comes, brings him back to life. So these disciples have seen Jesus do some amazing things. Heal people, bring people back from the dead, do all sorts of other miracles here and there. They've seen him teach. They're now beginning to understand why he teaches the way that he teaches and where that comes from. And now they're in the boat, and there's a storm all around. Got a little background leading up. They've seen what he is capable of. They've heard who he is. And they still come back to, do you not care? We're dying here, and you're sleeping in the boat. What are you doing? You're sleeping. All of us know, if you can't get somebody to wake up, what do? What's the best way to wake up a sleeping person? Bucket of water, splash it on him. Okay, Jesus is in this boat. Do you see the waves in the picture? Now, that's not a photograph, obviously. But it says the ship was taken on water. So Jesus, not only is he sleeping, but he's sleeping, and buckets and buckets and buckets of water are being dumped on him, and he's just out sleeping. Obviously, pretty deep sleep. So they shake him, yell at him, "Don't you care? We're dying here. We're being utterly destroyed." So Jesus wakes up, rebukes the wind, says to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. Then he turns to the disciples and he says to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Now, going back to it, when he says, "Peace, be still," basically he says, "Be silent, be muzzled." Maybe you're not supposed to say this in church, but Jesus says to the sea, "Shut up." Kind of literally, in today's vernacular, that's what he said to the sea. "Shut up," boom. Dead calm. Go from 10-foot swells to glass in an instant. So he's dead asleep, buckets and buckets of water, sleeping, everyone's running around screaming. And if they're anything like those, tough, burly seamen that I've seen on Deadliest Catch, they're probably not saying the nicest things either to each other, Big storms are brewing. They're disciples, but they weren't, saints just yet. Soon to be, but they're burly men of the sea, and so they're hollering at each other. I'm sure there's a panic in the boat. Jesus is sleeping. They're pouring buckets of water on him. Nothing. So they shake him. He gets up. Quiet. Shut up. Boom. I think it's kind of cool, the order. Gets up. Quiet. Shut up. Boom. Dead silent. Not a breath of wind. Instantly, the sea is like glass. Then he turns to the disciples. Can you imagine what's going on in their head? I'm sure there was a sense of relief. And then Jesus turns and looks at them. Oh, no. I'd have been a little scared. Okay, he just told the sea to shut up, and everything stopped. Whoa. He didn't yell at him. Didn't call him any names. He just said, "Why are you afraid?" After all that you've seen, after all that you've experienced with me, you've been by my side this whole time, and you still don't trust me? You still don't have faith? There's power in that. Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? Just 2 questions. That's all they ask. We don't know their responses. They don't say. But I can imagine they were probably about as quiet as the wind and the waves. So he brings up faith. What is faith? In the Old Testament, it's just a trust, a rest, a hope in God. It's an unswerving trust that God is going to save his people. An unswerving trust that what God has promised will come to pass. If God says it, it's going to be done. That's how faith is kind of explained and portrayed through the Old Testament. It's just resting in, knowing, trusting, believing with hope that God is there and he's going to do what he's always said he's going to do. In the New Testament, it's just tweaked just a little bit. It's the same message. However, we add a little something to the God piece. It's not separated from Jesus. Jesus and God are one and the same. And so that unswerving trust that God will do what he says he's going to do is an unswerving trust that Jesus is going to do and be what he said he's going to do and be. That's the only change in the New Testament, is God and Jesus are one. And so Jesus says, God is in your boat, and you're telling me you're dying. You're telling me you know without any doubt that you're dead. It's just a matter of time. We're going to drown in the lake. Now, if you remember the very first thing that Jesus said back in verse 35, let's go to the other side of the lake. He didn't say, hey guys, let's go to the middle of the lake and drown. Hey, let's sink the ship in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. Come on with me. I don't think he'd had a whole crew of guys with him. He said, let's go to the other side. And so when Jesus says, have you no faith? He's saying, I said we're going over there. And you're telling me you're going to die right here? Here is not there. I said there. So faith. Jesus was asleep. How can you sleep in the midst of that? All of that was going on, and Jesus was out cold. It doesn't seem to make any sense. It's not very logical that Jesus would be sleeping in the midst of that. Splashed with water, all the panic, terrible storm, we're surely going to die. Doesn't look like a lot of fun. I wouldn't enjoy it very much. Jesus was sleeping through the whole thing. Faith dispels fear, but only in proportion to its strength. I'm a science teacher. That's what I've done for a long time. Had done for a long time. This is an indirect proportion. As one goes up, the other goes down. As your faith goes up, as your trust, your hope, your belief that God is going to do what God is going to do, as that goes up, your fear and your worry may tend to go down. Because He's got it, right? Here in this Reformed church, we believe in the sovereignty of God. We believe that God is in control. God's got it. There's a storm, but why was Jesus sleeping? He's got it. Jesus, as a man in that boat, was asleep. He had a long day. He did a lot of teaching. It may not seem like it's hard work, but it's kind of a little draining, standing up in front of people teaching for a day. Not physically exhausting, necessarily. But he was tired. So as a man, he was sleeping, but as God, he was ever watchful. The Bible says that the creator of the universe never slumbers, he never sleeps, he always is watchful. And so Jesus as a man was asleep, but as God, he had it. He was watching. He knew what was going on. So how can he sleep? His faith is here. And if your faith is here, your fear's got to be somewhere down there. Disciples, on the other hand, they weren't quite sure about that faith, hope, trust thing. Because of that, they thought they were going to die in the middle of the lake. And so Jesus is saying, you know what? Crank up your faith-o-meter. That's a little corny. But crank up your faith-o-meter. Trust me that I got this. I'm sleeping. I'm God. I'm in control of all of this, and I'm sleeping, and you bother me. As a man, I needed some rest. I got this. You got God in your boat. You're not going down. I got this. Faith dispels fear, but only in proportion to its strength. The disciples misunderstood Jesus' faith. It's easy to do. Because society says there are certain things that we should be afraid of. We should be afraid of this. We should be afraid of that. Maybe we should be afraid of death. We should be afraid of abandonment. We should be afraid of rejection. There are things that we should be afraid of. We could come up with a whole list that society says, you know what? Fear this, fear that, fear this. You should be afraid of that. But Jesus says, no, you don't need to fear any of that because I got it. That's on me, Jesus says. I've got that. You don't have anything to fear about. Yeah, if you're taking it from me and you want to control that, you better fear. Because your flesh cannot control that. Jesus says, I can. I got it. Trust me. Fear drops. So the disciples misunderstood Jesus' faith for maybe not caring. They said, Jesus, don't you care? We're dying. We're dead. Don't you even care? They misunderstood his faith for a lack of caring. They may have misunderstood his faith for laziness, thinking, you know what, we're so busy battening down the hatches and all this kind of stuff, and if he would just get up and help me hold this sail, maybe we'd be okay, but he's just sleeping in the back of the boat. Lazy butt. Well, he stands in front of people all day and he just talks and he thinks he's tired. Try to do what I'm doing. This is hard. Lazy, get up. The whole time, Jesus has got it. They're just wasting their time, wasting their energy, because he's got it. He's got it under control. There's no need to fear. There's no need to fear any of those things. There's no need to fear death, rejection, abandonment, none of that stuff. As long as Christ is on board. If we are living in Christ, if we have Christ, nothing to fear. We got to believe that. We got to crank this one up. And as we do that, this one's going to drop. That was a long time ago. It was probably 14 years ago. Stacy and I went on our last vacation without children. We went to Seattle on a vacation for a while. And just before that, it was probably about a month before that, was when that tornado went through Spencer, remember, and destroyed the whole town. Some of you may remember that. And that whole storm system, which, by the way, realize it's officially summer. Some of you saw this. You know it is summer in South Dakota when Jay Trobeck says the word tornadic. So there was tornadic activity this week, summer. Nobody in the world has any idea what tornadic means, but we in Kelloland know what tornadic means. And so there was heavy tornadic activity headed towards South Dakota that summer, headed toward, Sioux Falls. It was in South Dakota, headed towards Sioux Falls. And I remember we were at my in-laws' house, and we don't wear our shoes when we're walking around the house. And so we're walking with just our socks or bare feet, whatever. And I remember my mother-in-law running around saying, "Put your shoes on, put your shoes on, put your shoes on." Like, what? Put our shoes on? We're looking at Stacy like, why is she so insistent that we put our shoes on? And so finally, somebody asked, I don't think I was brave enough to ask, but somebody asked and said, why do we need to put our shoes on? She goes, well, if the tornado comes through here and breaks glass, I don't want you having to walk across broken glass to put your shoes on, or to put your shoes on and get out of here. You don't want glass in your feet. And then I remembered, I've seen that Bruce Willis Die Hard movie where he has to run across a broken glass and he's got cut up feet. I'm like, no, I don't want that. I'm going to put my shoes on. So that was vividly in my mind. So we're flying home from Seattle. We're going to land in Minneapolis in about 30 minutes. And all of a sudden my ears kind of start to hurt. Pressure starts to pick up, so you start doing if I swallow really hard. Can you really swallow hard? But you swallow hard. And then, Stacy, you have some gum, so we're chewing gum. We're like, I can't get this, and it's getting worse, it's getting worse. And so I kind of lean over in the aisle, and I make eye contact with the stewardess at the front of the plane, and the instant I made eye contact with her, pause. I don't think it matters how many times you've been on a plane, even if you're a stewardess. If 80 oxygen masks drop from the ceiling, it's probably going to shock you a little bit. Okay? So we're like, and people are like, oh, your head hurt, my head hurts, and people are talking. So I lean over, I make eye contact with her. That very instant, all the oxygen masks drop from the ceiling, and she goes, and then the very instant after she does that, the plane goes, we are literally leaning forward in our seats, because the plane is, and I'm not even exaggerating, I'll bet you, we were looking down. And so, of course, there's mad panic in the plane. And so I grab Stacy's oxygen mask and I'm putting it on her, which I broke the first rule because you're always supposed to attach your own oxygen mask before helping somebody else. So I already broke the rules. So then we put it on her and we're like, breathe. And then it's like, oh, the bag isn't filling up. Oh, they say something about the bag. Is the bag supposed to fill up or is it not supposed to? Is anything working? Because the bag is not filling up, which I pay attention. It doesn't have to fill up, which I don't even get how that works. I think they're just lying to us. But anyways, I had mine on, and so we're all like trying to breathe and trying to see, okay, is anything happening here? And so I had broken an earlier rule on a plane. But we'd done a lot of hiking, a lot of walking, all that kind of stuff when we were in Seattle. And I washed my feet really nicely. I put on some fresh socks. And so in the plane about 20 minutes earlier, I had taken my shoes off. Which, don't do that in a plane. But I took my shoes off. And so we're sitting there, and we have our oxygen masks on, like going, and Stacy's like grabbing my hand, and I'm thinking, I got to get my shoes on. So I'm frantically untying my shoes and tying my shoes back up, and she's like, give me your hand. I'm like, I got to get my shoes on. So I was like, I got to get my shoes on. And so frantically trying to put his shoes on, And she's like grabbing my hand, and she's thinking, if we die, I want to die conjoined to you. And I'm thinking, I got to get my shoes on. Because when this plane crashes and I walk out of it, I don't want glass in the bottom of my feet. Now, maybe that just sounds silly, but honestly, my thought was, I'm not done yet. God's got some work to do. And He's called me on His team. If this plane crashes, I'm going to have shoes on because I'll probably be cut up everywhere else. I want to keep the bottoms of my feet as healthy as possible, especially if I got to carry you out because you keep wanting to grab my hand because we're going to die. No, I'm walking out of this thing. Now, maybe that seems stupid. And I wish I could say it was like a great faith moment, like, oh, yes, oh, God's not. But I was just thinking, when this thing crashes, I got to have my shoes on, so when I'm walking across the broken glass and the shards of metal, I don't cut my feet. Like, maybe that's just sheer stupidity. I like to think it's great faith. But that's what faith is all about. I wasn't, really, honestly, I didn't even think of the fear of dying. I just had to get my shoes on, because when I walk, I forgot to tell at 9 o'clock, the plane didn't actually crash. Eventually it leveled out, and then we heard the pilot, cabin pressurized, oxygen, thank you. What?
Apologize, cabin pressure is lower altitude, Minneapolis, couple minutes.
Okay, so cabin, okay, I think we, pieced some little things together. But we were diving to get to a safe altitude because we lost pressure in the cabin. Didn't feel like it. Felt like we were taking the fast route to Minneapolis Airport. But that's the kind of faith that we need to have. Now, Jesus in John chapter 16, before he leaves the earth, he's talking to his disciples, and he gives them one sure thing. He says, in this world you will have trouble. If you're following me, Jesus says, I have trouble, and there's a heck of a lot more trouble for me to come, and if you're following me, you're going to have trouble, period. There will be trouble. There will be storms ahead. They will be fierce, and sometimes they will be scary, fierce storms that you're going to face. Do you know what he says next to finish this sentence? No guilt or shame if you don't. I'm just wondering. But take heart. I have overcome the world. There's going to be storms in this world, and you're going to face them, and they're going to hit you hard. But I got it. I'm good. You're good, because I'm on the boat. I'm with you. I've overcome the world. Nothing's going to take you down. So Jesus speaks. Says, be silent, be muzzled to the sea. Dead calm. I'm not even sure if you could probably hear the disciples breathing at that point. Dead calm. That's just a sign of the power that the Creator has over His creation. It has all fun with one of those little visual word puzzles, Creator over creation. The power of the Creator over all creation, anything. God's got it. He's got it under control. It's in His hand. He's fine. He's on board. We're good. Now, in theory, that's great. Putting that into true practice is the hard part. But that's what He's calling us to do, is to try to put that into practice. Trust. Unswervingly trust that He's going to do what He said He's going to do. Then He turns to the disciples and rebukes them. Why are you afraid? Still, after all you've seen, after all you've experienced, you still don't have the faith that I got this? Our attitude of our spirit often proves the deficiency and the imperfection of our confidence in our Lord. Who we are and how we respond shows the depth of our faith. And I'm not up here saying I got this figured out and do it like me. No. But the way we respond, our attitude, shows the strength of our trust or shows the inadequacy or the deficiencies of our trust. Society says we should fear, we should panic in certain situations. Christ says, hey, I got you. Great theologian back in the day. Doesn't matter if you call him Augustine or Augustine, he probably, answer to either one. When we allow temptations to overcome us, Christ sleeps in us. We forget Christ at such times. Let us then remember him. Let us awake him. He will speak. He will rebuke the tempest in the soul, and there will be a great calm. We don't need to go to him and shake him and say, Jesus, I'm dying here. It's okay if we do, but we can tap him on the shoulder and say, Jesus, I need your help. And if he's sleeping, he'll open an eye and go, all right, done. He's got it. It's when we try to do it on our own. That's when we need to be scared. But he's got it. He will speak. He will rebuke the tempest of the soul, and there will be a great calm. Now, at face value, that's this passage. But I said there's a little bit more to it, and this is my favorite part, so I'm going to go a little bit longer. My favorite part. The more I studied this, the more I saw, if we go back to verse 39, when Jesus woke up and rebuked the wind and the sea, and to the sea he said, be muzzled, be silent, shut up, sea. And it went silent. The more I read, the more I found the word that Jesus used when he said, be silent, be muzzled, is used 8 times in the New Testament, one other time in Mark. It's Mark chapter 1, verse 25, when Jesus was talking to a man with an impure spirit. He had evil in him. And Jesus said to the evil spirit in the man, he said, shut up, be silent, be muzzled. And the demon was cast out. So everything I read said, when Jesus spoke to the wind and the waves, and he said, be silent, be muzzled, he could have used a whole bunch of other words, but he chose this one that ties back into the other time that he used it, when he cast out the demon. And so on all that I read, and this is the part I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. I got to see if this other person. And the more I read, the more they say, using that specific word implies that there was an element of evil in that storm in the middle of the lake, in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus, remember, Jesus said, let's go to the other side. He didn't say why. He didn't tell him, nobody questioned him at that time. He just said, all right, we're done here, let's go over there. All right, let's go. And so they went. He didn't say why. And, as Clyde has been teaching us, you read a little before, and then what? Read a little after. You turn the page from Mark 4, you go to Mark 5, verse 2. They get to the other side. Jesus gets out of the boat. A man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. Then in the next couple of verses, it talks about this man and how he'd been living most of his life with impure spirits inside of him. And he was tormented by these spirits, and he was tormenting all the people in the towns around with the spirits that were inside of him. The people in the towns tried to shackle him, they tried to bind him, they tried to imprison him, but he would break chains, he would escape from anything where they tried to imprison him. And so he lived in the tombs, in the caves, and he beat himself, he hurt himself, he cut himself. He was tormented, and he tormented the entire area. Then we go to verse 6 and 7. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. Verse 6 basically says when he was up on the hill in the tombs, he was looking at the sea, and he saw the boat coming across. He saw the storm, he saw... no storm. He saw the boat. He saw Jesus, and so he started climbing down from the tombs because he said, I got to meet that guy. So 6 kind of comes before 2, but 6 shows he saw him coming from a long ways off, so he started climbing down. So the moment Jesus stepped off the boat, he was there, and he was on his knees in front of Jesus, and then he shouted at the top of his voice, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me. And Jesus went on to kind of have a brief conversation and asked this man, the impure spirit, what is your name? And the Spirit says we are legion. And there's significance in that name because a legion in that time, a legion of Roman soldiers was 6,000 soldiers. He says we are legion. And so then what Jesus does is he casts out the impure spirit into a herd of pigs. Thousands of pigs then run off the cliff into the sea, and they're basically cast into the sea, and the man is freed from his tormentors. Jesus wanted to cross the lake because there was a life that needed to be liberated on the other side. After he did that, the people in the town were freaked out. Number one, he just sent thousands of pigs into the sea. This guy that had been tormenting him for years, he did something freaky with that guy, and now that guy seems okay. And so Jesus freaked out the people in the town, and they said, just go away from us. We're scared of you. Just go, please leave. So there are some people that don't understand Jesus. They don't understand Christ. They're freaked out by him, and so they would rather put him at an arm's length and just say, no, you stay over here. I'm gonna do this because I didn't even know what to do with that. Does that sound familiar? I know some people like that. So, as Jesus was then getting back into the boat after they said, please just go, we don't know what to do with you, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis. The Decapolis is like the 10 surrounding towns in that area, in that region. Tell them how much Jesus has done for you. And all the people were amazed. Jesus had a purpose. He went. He had something to do. There was a life on the other side that needed him. And there were lives on the other side that needed to know him. In John 14, Jesus tells the disciples, very truly, I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do. In fact, he will do even greater works than these, because I am going to the Father. Jesus says, the one who believes in me will do greater works than these. Jesus said the people who believe in Christ will be able to do something greater than him. Now, I'm not being heretical here. I'm not saying we are greater, but there is one thing that we can do greater. I said that at a camp once, and I asked the students at the camp, I said, so what is the one thing that we can do greater than Christ? And somebody said, sin. Like, ooh, good one. You're right. I'm thinking of good things. Yes, so maybe there's two things we can do better than Jesus. We can sin better than Jesus, but there's something good that we can do better than Jesus. He said it himself. I'm not making it up. Those are his words. One who believes in me will do greater works than these because Jesus goes to the Father. So what is that thing that we can do? What could be greater? What can I do that's greater, something that Christ couldn't do? Jesus told the man, you stay here. Don't come with us. You stay here. You live out your transformation. And then you go and share about me, the one who transformed you. Jesus has always been here. I was once here. I met Jesus, and I'm moving my way. I'm not going to say I'm here. I'm moving in this direction, though. Jesus can't live out his transformation. He's transformed. He's the pinnacle. He can't live that out. People can't see the change. So Jesus said, I'm freaking these people out. You stay because they know you. They've been scared by you for years. They've seen the life that you had to live. Now you go and show them what I've done. That's what I can do. That's what we can do that he couldn't do. And it says, all the people in the Decapolis were amazed at this new man that they saw. And they wanted to hear, okay, so how did this happen? What? I knew you before. I know you now. What happened? And he shared. Now, to get to the other side, Jesus knew what he was doing. He didn't explain it. He just said, let's go over there. The impure spirit knew because he saw him coming from afar, so he started climbing down to go meet that guy that just wiped out the waves in the sea, in the wind. Evil knew. That's why Jesus had to tell the sea, shut up. because something was trying to prevent them from getting across the lake to that person that needed hope and healing. Because even evil knows that one person with hope, one healed person, can change a Decapolis. If they could stop that boat, if they could sink it in the middle of the lake, they're not going to get those 10 cities. So evil tried to stop them. It's okay, though. The good guy always wins. One of our kids, we used to watch movies. It didn't matter if they were cartoons. It could be Care Bear movie. It didn't matter what it was. Because there's always some good versus evil, and no matter what the movie was, no matter how feel-goody, happy, Care Bear-y it kind of was, the climax of the conflict, one of our kids, I'm not going to say any names, one of our kids would get so stressed. The bad guys are going to win. This person would get up and run up and down the hallway because they had so much nervous energy bent up. I'm like, this is the Care Bears. And you're literally running up and down the hallway because you're so freaked out. And so we used to say, Grace, we used to say, child of mine, the good guy always wins. The good guy always wins. And so what's really neat is after years of that, we'll watch movies that may actually have some scary parts. And we'll make eye contact and we'll look at each other. And this child of mine will look like, I know, I'm good. Yeah, the good guy always wins, right? Yeah, the good guy always wins. Good guy always wins. We're good. Jesus didn't give you the dream of getting to the other side of the lake only to abandon you in a storm when you're halfway there. And remember this, your turning point, my turning point is not just for me. On the shoreline of my breakthrough, there are people who are in need of hope. There are people who are in need of healing. It's not just about me. It is about me a little bit, but it's not just about me. It's not just about that one man. It's about the Decapolis, the thousands of people. And I don't know how many conversations I've had with some of you in this last week and a half. Numerous conversations with people saying, if you don't make it through this being changed, I don't know if you can change. This is not about Clyde. This is not about Becky. This is not about the Teals. And yet at the same time, it is about them. Because I am changed. I am transformed as a result of them getting to the other side of this horrific storm. I am changed. I have more hope. I am healed in many ways. And many of you are. I've had the conversations with you. He's got it. Jesus says, I'm in the boat. It's on me. Trust me, we're good. I win every time. May not always look like it, but I win every time. Good guy always wins. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for being you. I thank you that you are in our boat. And I thank you that you've got this. In your holy name we pray. Amen.